Hi everyone, and welcome to our next tutorial video. In this video we're going to take a look at something called comparison operators. And you might not have heard that before, but you've probably used it in math. We're just talking about using things like less than, greater than, less than, equal to, things like that. So we're going to figure out how we can do that or use comparison operators in block programming. So let's take a look. First thing, we need to understand the difference between a digital input and an analog input when it comes to our Arduino board. For example, a push button. A push button is either pushed in or it's not. It has two states. A light switch on the wall is either on or off. It has two states. So when we talk about a digital input, we're talking about an input to the Arduino that has two states. It's low or it's high. It's a 0 or it's a 1. That's what we mean by a digital input. In this example, we're going to take a look at an analog input. What are some examples of analog inputs? Well, a dimmer switch on your dining room wall may change the brightness of the lights just by turning the dimmer switch or sliding something up and down. That gives the input multiple signals, if you will, or more than two. Same as a weigh scale. It's used to weigh, obviously, a bunch of different weights. So there are multiple inputs, if you will. So that's what we mean by an analog input. In our example here, we're going to use a potentiometer. A potentiometer is just a variable resistor, and that allows us to change the resistance. And what that's going to do is change the input voltage to the Arduino. We can have a range of inputs going into the board from 0 to 5 volts. And what Arduino does is it looks at that voltage and it converts it to a 10-bit number, if you will. If we figure out what 2 to the 10th is, then that is 1024. In other words, there's 1024 different possibilities we can have for inputs going into the Arduino board. Where do we have to hook that up? We have to hook that in down here. This is the analog in section of the board. This is A0, A1, A2, A3, A4, and A5. We can input an analog signal into the Arduino in these ports or pins down here. If it's a digital input, like a push button, we can use this one over here, like input D7 or D8. But if we have an analog input, like an input from a potentiometer, we must use these ports down here. And like we said, what it's going to do, it's going to take the input voltage, which is somewhere between 0 and 5 volts, and the Arduino is going to convert it to a number from 0 to 10,023. So let's take a look at our program and how this is going to work. So we've hooked it up as follows, and you can try this when we're done. Basically what this does is it takes an input variable. So I've created a variable called input here, and what it does is it reads the analog pin. So I have to go to input here. I'm going to go read analog pin. I'm going to put that in here, and what I'm doing is I'm reading analog pin A0, and whatever that value is, it's going to put it into the variable called input. What I can do is I can actually print the value on the screen, and that's what the serial monitor does. It allows us to see certain values inside the Arduino board. So what this block here does is it goes in and looks at the value going into A0, and it just prints it on the screen. What this control block does is it says if the input variable is greater than or equal to 200, then we're going to set pin 13 to high. In other words, we want to turn on the green LED. If it is not greater than or equal to 200, it's going to jump down to else, and it's going to set pin 13 to low. In other words, it's going to turn the LED off. I can go in and I can change the comparison operator here. I've got less than or equal to, I've got equal to, I've got not equal to, I've got greater than, and I've got greater than or equal to. So I can go in and change that if I wish, depending upon what I'm trying to do. So first thing is we're going to go down here, we're going to turn on the serial monitor. And right now our simulation isn't running, so it's just showing an input value of 0. That's really an invalid value because it's not started the simulator yet. So let's do that. And you might have seen some numbers jump here. Let's go up here and change the analog input value by clicking on the potentiometer dial and just turning it. And you can see that the input value changes, and like I said, this is a 10-bit number that ranges from, if we go all the way down here, it's 0, and if I turn it all the way over to here, it goes all the way up to 1023 as we expect. Now what this code does is it says if the input is greater than or equal to 200, then it's going to set pin 13 to high. It's going to turn on the LED. Right now we can see the value going in the serial monitor is 0, but if I turn this and if I go above 200, you can see now the LED turns on. We are at 327. We're greater than 200. If I bring it back down and I go less than 200, then I get this here. 184 is less than 200, so it is turned off. I'm going to stop the simulator and we can go in and we can change the values here if I want. So if I wanted to say 400, if the input is greater than or equal to 400, then we will turn on the LED. So I can go in and change that value. And if I start the simulator, you can see that we're at 184. We need to be greater than or equal to 400 to turn it on. So I can go up here, and soon as I get over 400, there I'm at 511. You can see that yes, the LED does turn on, and if I go back below 400, you can see that yes, it does turn off. So that is how we can use an analog input into the Arduino. That's how we can read it. This here, using the serial monitor, we can see how the Arduino interprets that analog input as a 10-bit number, and then we can use that in our program to do various things like turn on an LED or whatever we want to do. So try this in Tinkercad, see if you can get this to work the same way. That's it for this tutorial. We'll see you next time.